Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another beautiful day of music and productivity. If you're one of those people, anyway, I slept until like 11 today. It's a great time to be alive. Today, we are going to be going over some basics of FM8 and some more FM synthesis tips, so hope you're ready. Now, we have already touched on a lot of the basics of using FM synthesis and other synthesis types. And a couple weeks ago, we even went through how to use Serum and its basic functions, its signal chain, and the effects included. However, as I showed you these details in Serum, I also thought that I would like to shine a light on one of my other favorite synthesizers, which is FM8. Is definitely one of the best tools you can get for creating FM synthesized sounds, in my personal opinion. Right out of the box, it comes with dozens, if not hundreds, of presets which you can use to already come up with a very professional sound if you're looking for plucks, basses, pads, evolving pads, growls, anything really. All of them are, in general, really amazing sounds. But just like with Serum, it is truly a synth that you will need to learn how to use outside of its presets, or you won't really be able to use it to its full potential. Let's start with learning the basics of the signal flow of FM8. This process is a bit more complicated than your standard synth, but it is also very easy to learn due to the graphical interface that they have provided for us. As always, the signal will start with your oscillators, and you want to find those on your synth right away. These can be accessed in a few different locations in FM8 here. It can be accessed in this ops menu here, as well as these 8 individual oscillator menus, A, B, C, D, E, F, X, and Z on the right here. From here, you can go into your oscillators, select a variety of waveforms from simple waves such as saw, square, sine, etc., to formant waves, to more complex style waveforms. And you can also go into the individual oscillators and change their pitch, which is their ratio control, their offset, and a various other amount of controls just in this ops menu. But if you go into the individual oscillator menus themselves, you'll also see a variety of options for modulation, as well as envelope control, panning, velocity, overall volume, and a couple more controls you can play with, as well as this FM matrix on the right, which is a very important tool which we will be exploring in a moment. One thing that's important to know before we start getting anywhere is how to actually use the pitching of the different waveforms in FM8, which is a lot more complicated than it is in Serum or other synths, because it works on a ratio and not on like a linear scale. So instead of increasing or decreasing linearly with 1 octave up, 2 octaves up, 3 octaves up, it increases exponentially by doubling, tripling, quadrupling the waveform speed using this ratio control. The end result is exactly the same, it's just how it changes it that's just a little bit different. So for example, right now we have it set to 1, so it's just going to play the notes on the keyboard as is. But if we want to play an octave up, then we would have to set this to 2. And if we wanted to do 2 octaves up, you'd think that we'd set it to 3, but we're not actually going to set it to 3, we're going to set it to 4. And that's going to give us our 3 octaves up. Just for the shits of it, what if we wanted to do 3 octaves up? Well, we'd have to double it again and go all the way up to 8. Likewise, if you wanted to do 4, you'd have to double it, go to 16. But what about for going down? Because when you go down, the ratio bottoms out at 0, so you can't actually go down in the same manner you go up. Well, let's start off at 1 again with our basic notes. To pitch your waveform down, you actually have to half it instead of doubling it. So if I want an octave down, you gotta go to 0.5. If you want to go 2 octaves down, you have to half that again and go to 0.25. And if you wanted to go another octave down, guess what? You gotta half it again. This keeps going all the way down to however low you want it for each oscillator. However, it's not necessarily something you want to or need to use all the time, but that is how you use it. Each oscillator has its own control menu, which you can go into by clicking on them in the FM matrix over here or by selecting their menu on the left. However, these other menus will also become very important if you want to use this instrument to its full potential. There is a separate menu on the left here called your envelope that lets you control the envelope for every oscillator at once. When you open it up, it has the envelope for every oscillator here that is included, including one for the pitch. If you want to, you can even link all of these oscillators envelopes together using these chain links on the right here, and that just links together their envelopes so that you can change them all simultaneously. Notice how it's only changing the ones that I have linked together, and if I link another one, it matches it for me. There is also a separate menu here just for focusing on the modulation controls and the mod matrix of FM8. However, this particular section is a bit more complicated when you start getting into it, so I would have to do a separate video on it entirely. If you guys want that, let me know in the comments and I can definitely get that going on our next set of videos. Now that we've found where the oscillators are, where the envelopes are, and we've gone over some basic controls though, let's go back to these oscillators and see where the bare bone of the FM synthesis actually happens in the software. And this is where your FM matrix comes into play. As you can see, you have access to all of the oscillators here, including your X and Z, and you can see it has all of these grids available that you can click on, drag up, and drag down to specific numbers between 1 to 100. Basically what this is once you activate an oscillator by right-clicking it in this mod matrix, you can set that oscillator to modulate another oscillator by clicking the section and dragging up. By default, you have this basic sine wave. But let's say on this A oscillator we want to go crazy, we'll add in a sawtooth. But we aren't yet doing any FM synthesis. We still have that basic sine wave coming out. So to get any of that actually happening, you have to click on this grid here between A and F and get that to go and do its FM synthesis. Let's crank it up to 100. Not pleasing, but this is where the FM comes into play and you can adjust it to wherever you want. Maybe you just want to kick it around 20? That's perfectly fine. Personally, I think anything higher than 30 or 40 in this scenario would be a little too much unless you're working to create some crazy sound effects. But what if you want to instead modulate F to D? Well, you can do that actually. Instead of going down on the left here and then across, you can actually use this particular part of the matrix on the right here to go up and across to the left. So let's open D, let's activate it by right clicking, don't forget to do that, and add in, let's say, a triangle wave. And to get F to modulate this D, we're gonna turn this up right here, and you can see the arrows will guide you to the correct oscillator and show you the exact path that you're using. This is what I mean when I say it's easy to learn, because the graphic interface shows you exactly what's going on. But you're not going to hear anything different yet if I just hit play. It still sounds like that basic sound of A modulating into F. To hear what F is doing to our D oscillator, we actually have to send D out of the synth, which is this bottom row here. You can use this to change the volume of this oscillator and send it out. So this is where the insane complexities of this start shining through. Already I have A modulating into F and going out of our synth at the bottom, but I also have A modulating into F with F modulating into D and then going out of our synth. And it's already giving us a super complex waveform and a super complex sound. It is important to note when working with these oscillators that while there is 8 of them technically, A, B, C, D, E, F, X, and Z, 9 if you're counting the pitch, which isn't really an oscillator on its own, only A to F are actual waveform oscillators that will produce sound. X is an oscillator specifically for outputting noise, such as white noise, pink tone, something like that you want to add to thicken your sound, while the Z oscillator is an oscillator that focuses on fine-tuning the filter and envelope of your sound. It's not actually necessarily an oscillator either. It's more like subtractive synthesis that helps you clean up some parts of your signal after you've done all that FM synthesis to make it sound really messy. And just to see how messy it is, you can even go into the spectrum analyzer on the bottom left here, and it can show you the exact end result waveform of whatever you've selected and whatever you're outputting from the synth. And once you fine-tune your basic sound and you want to add a little bit of style to it, you can come into the pitch control menu over here and you can adjust the amplitude envelope. You can add in some portamento to really give it that nice sliding sound. Or you can just turn that all off and play around with the basic tuning. Now, in the basic tuning of the pitch control menu, it doesn't go by ratio. So if you're looking to move your whole sound up or down, this is the place to do it instead of going into these ratios in the oscillators and playing with it there. These are great if you want to change the waveform and change how it's modulating the others. But if you want to change your sound's overall tone and pitch, you want to go into the tuning here and actually use this control as it goes up and down by semitones, and it's a lot easier to use. Now that we know the majority of the basics, we are missing out on one extremely cool tool in this that is so often overlooked, even by myself when I use this synth. FM8 has this menu in it on the left here, which is called Easy Morph. And it looks a little complicated, but it's actually not that hard to learn. As you can see when you open it up, it has this sort of 4-square grid on the left. And what's really interesting is that each of these 4 squares contains a completely new set of the same 8 oscillators and effects as in the first one. To break that down, let's say we're working in the bottom left square, which is where we're working by default. When you open up the FM8 synth, this is already set to the far bottom left, and that's where all of these can be found by default. But let's say that you wanted to blend the sound that you made with all of your other oscillators in this square with another sound without opening another FM8 synth and modulate them together later on in the chain using FM8's onboard effects and merge them all into one cohesive sound. That's what this area is primarily for. You can move this little red square up, down, left, and right to navigate to the different areas. As you can see, I'm in the bottom left, and if we go over here, you can see I have all this modulation going on. But if I navigate to the top left, it's all gone. It's a fresh instance. We can go in and we can create an entirely new sound and mix it with the old one. And using these 2 bars you see on the top and on the right, you can adjust a sort of spread from that red square that makes all these little dots kind of shoot out across the grid. What this is essentially doing is blending everything from each little bit of the grid into one sound. This red square kind of symbolizes the exact area on the synth's grid that it is getting the output sound from. So if I moved it down here, it would only be getting it from that bottom left square. But if I moved it maybe up here, even without any spread, it would be getting some signals from these other 3 if they were active. But with spread, it actually melds them together a lot more cohesively and makes a sort of soothing blend between all of them. You can already see how this can be used to make some pretty unique and crazy sounds. And in terms of signal chain, all 32 oscillators are sent through the Easy Morph section where they are basically mixed together in your own chosen way. So the signal starts at your oscillators in your expert control menu here and shifts up to your Easy Morph, so it's climbing up the synth. And you also have a variety of controls here you can use to modulate the sound once it's all blended together: LFO, timbre, output, and your various effects here. But the signal keeps going forward and it actually passes through this arpeggiator next. One of my favorite things to do with this synth is to just turn this on and kind of let it go and do its own thing and mess with the pitches and the note order and the accents. That's something this particular synth excels at, in my opinion, is plucks and arps. But I've also found that it makes some amazing basses and pads as well. Similar to Serum, the effects will then pass on to the onboard effects rack with various effects to choose from. It's got overdrive, distortion, EQs, reverb, phasers, choruses, delays, you name it, it's on here. And once it's gone through all of those effect sections, it'll pass through the master output control, which is right here. And it's got things like master volume. You can adjust the polyphony of it. You can adjust the unison of it and give it some detune. You can change the master pitch and portamento. And you can even adjust some of the basic arpeggio settings, which is really cool if you just want to open up the master and adjust some of the more general things all at once. You can even add some qualities of analog or digital style synthesis to it using this quality generator here, which is really cool if you want your sound to feel more analog or feel more digital. It just adds a little bit of color at the end. Well guys, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. I hope you found it useful and informative as always, and make sure you stick around for next week's video. And I hope you guys are excited because that album release I mentioned, it's coming up pretty soon. As of when this video comes out, we got about 16 days until it's released. And we're going to be doing a live stream on the day it's out right here on YouTube for an hour or two. And we're going to listen to the music. We're going to answer questions. We're going to do all that kind of stuff. So if you guys want to pop in, you're more than welcome. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week, guys. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and write some good music. I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Bye-bye.